I've spoken on several occasions about the prospect of Daniel Dubois defending his WBA regular heavyweight title against Dylan White. I've said that if Dylan White wants to become heavyweight champion or pick up at least some version of a heavyweight title, then the route I think is most sensible for him to go is facing Daniel Dubois. He says that the only reason that fight didn't happen is because Frank Warren basically gave away the December 3rd date to the Tyson Fury Anthony Joshua fight, which didn't happen. And if that hadn't been looked at by Frank Warren, then I guess, according to Dylan White, he would have already fought, or excuse me, he'd be fighting Daniel Dubois this coming weekend. So, yeah, I think that would be the best route for Dylan White to go if titles and legacy and having that trinket is really what he's after, if that's his priority. But if it's just about money, or mainly about money, then of course Daniel Dubois isn't the right route to go. The right route to go would be the Anthony Joshua fight, or somehow, some way to get a fight against Alexander Usyk. Rematching Tyson Fury is just laughable. However, there's somebody else who I think might want to look at going this particular route against Daniel Dubois, and that is Anthony Joshua. Now, the reason I say this is because AJ has made an awful lot of money. You have to figure he's made more money than anybody else in the heavyweight division. So how much more money does he need? Isn't legacy something that's actually important to him at this stage? I don't know. I'm asking these as questions. If legacy is more important than just making loads and loads of extra money, and it's not that money is not going to matter to him at all. Of course it's going to matter to some extent, but we were led to believe that he fought Alexander Usyk and Kubrat Pulev in the UK as opposed to fighting them abroad. You know, Eddie Hearn said that he could have made a lot more money fighting them abroad, but wanted to fight them in the UK because he cared more about the fans and legacy and all this kind of thing. When I say legacy, you know, giving back to the British public by way of letting them come to his fights rather than having everything out in Saudi Arabia. So this is what we were led to believe by Eddie Hearn. I'm not saying it's true, of course. But if it is true, then the Daniel Dubois fight, I'm not saying it has to be next, okay? But the Daniel Dubois route, rather than going through Tyson Fury or Alexander Usyk, might be the way to go. Because if he beats Dubois, he basically becomes mandatory for whoever holds the WBA title. And you look at Daniel Dubois and you think, okay, he's young, he's got power, he's got a good jab, he's an improving fighter for sure, but he's shown vulnerability. I mean, maybe AJ's not the same fighter he used to be, that's up for debate, but tell me what Daniel Dubois does better than Vladimir Klitschko. Because for my money, he doesn't have a better jab. His straight right hand is not as straight or fast. He's not as tall. He's not as experienced. His left hook, certainly at long range, isn't as good as Vladimir Klitschko's. Yeah, even a 40 or 41-year-old Klitschko, the version that AJ fought. So I think AJ can beat Daniel Dubois if his mind is anywhere close to being in the right place. I think he can beat him with his experience, with his size, with his attributes. You can question AJ's mind at the moment. You can say he's mentally fragile, but you could question Daniel Dubois as well. He took a knee against Joe Joyce and he didn't get up. He caved in that fight. He was forced into submission. And that's without even being hurt. And when I say hurt, I'm talking about concussed, right? He had a bruised eye. They claimed that he had a fractured orbital, but there was no evidence produced to show that this was the case. So we have, well, let me not say we have to take it at face value, because I'm not taking it at face value. But those of you who believe it, you are taking it at face value because no evidence was produced. I'm not saying it's not true, but I'm just laying the facts out here. And bear in mind, lots of fighters have gone the whole 12 rounds with a fractured orbital. I'm not trying to say that Daniel Dubois is a coward or say that, oh, if I was in his position, I would have carried on. I'm not saying anything ridiculous like that because I've never had a fractured orbital, okay? All I'm telling you is, against someone like AJ surely would be looking at Dubois and thinking about that Joyce fight and saying, I can get you in that same position. Surely that would give AJ confidence, knowing that Dubois has choked in a fight before. You see what I'm saying? And as I say, Dubois was stopped, in the 10th? He couldn't have gone 2 more rounds. Many fighters have gone the whole 12. They've had a fractured orbital bone from early in a fight, and they've gone the whole 12. When was Dubois' orbital bone, if it was fractured at all, fractured? When did that happen? At what point in the fight? There was only 2 rounds to go. It's not as if Joe Joyce was pinning him on the ropes and unloading huge, heavy shots the way he was against Joseph Parker. No. It was a fairly measured pace. It wasn't some crazy tempo. Daniel Dubois was taking jabs to the eye, which he couldn't seem to avoid. And that's another thing. Why was Dubois unable to make the adjustments to parry the jab, block the jab, slip the jab? There was none of that. This shows Daniel Dubois' limitations. And I know he's with Shane McGuigan now, and McGuigan's trying to get him to be a little bit more fluid. He's not trying to change him completely, but he's trying to add some subtleties to his game that were missing before. But as of right now, I haven't seen that much of a difference in Daniel Dubois. Maybe we'll see more difference in this fight that he's going to have on a weekend on the Fury Chisora undercard. But based on what I've seen up until this point, if AJ can have a comeback fight, get his confidence back up, I think the Daniel Dubois route would actually be something worth looking at. Because if he wants to get straight back in the mix, or at least after, let's say, 2 fights, 3 if you include, let's say between 2 to 3 fights. If he wants to get back in the heavyweight title picture within 2 to 3 fights, the Dubois fight is a good option because that basically makes him mandatory. And if he was to go in there and beat Dubois, who's to say the WBA would straight away have him fight the winner of Fury Usyk, presuming that fight even happens? Maybe he'd be allowed a defense against an opponent of his choosing, which again could help build him back up in terms of his confidence and all that kind of thing and help him gel with whatever trainer he's working with this week. And by the way, something I forgot to talk about, I meant to mention it in a few previous videos, and that is these fighters who are constantly changing trainer. Now, AJ, of course, was with one trainer effectively from his days in Team GB all the way through to, God, when did he get rid of McCracken? It was after the first Usyk fight. And people talk about Tony Sims. Tony Sims was just the front man. Tony Sims was in AJ's corner because there was a rule in place regarding boxing coaches in Britain where amateur coaches couldn't coach professionals either or, right? They changed that rule, and literally straight away, Rob McCracken was in AJ's corner after they changed that rule. So it was well known in the trade, certainly. Dylan White actually baited that up before it was announced. I think he baited up a few fights before Rob McCracken was officially AJ's trainer. But it was well known in the trade that McCracken was the one training AJ behind the scenes. Yeah, and Tony Sims was just there in the corner as the front man. So AJ's been with one trainer pretty much, all the way from the amateurs. I know he had a different trainer at Finchley, but when he was on Team GB, he had one trainer all the way up until the first Usyk fight. And then he's changed to Rob Garcia and he's working with Fernandez. Now potentially we'll see another trainer for his next fight. 3 trainers, let's say, 4 if you want to add in Fernandez. That's not a crazy amount compared to some other fighters out there, including Dylan White, right? Dylan White started off, I think, with Chris Oko. He was definitely with Oko, but I'm not sure if there was anybody prior to Oko. So he was with Chris Oko. Then he switched to Jonathan Banks. Then he switched to Mark Tibbs. Then he switched to Xavier Miller. And now we switched to Buddy McGirt. Will he switch again? We'll see. Now, with some fighters, Chad Dawson's another guy who was always switching coaches. You look at them and you think the fighter's confused. There's something wrong here with the fighter psychologically. They can't seem to figure out what it is they need. Maybe there's a personality issue with the fighter, you know? Whereas with Dillian Whyte, I don't think there really is a issue with him switching and working with all these different coaches, because I can actually see the things that he's learned from the different coaches, you know? And with someone with such little experience like Dillian Whyte, I know it's annoying for people to hear him say, I'm still learning, when the guy's like 35, but realistically, he is still learning. And you could see it in the Jermaine Franklin fight. The slipping and blocking that he was doing in the Franklin fight and the cross-arm, Archie Moore, Ken Norton style defense, that was something new. So he is still learning. The issue with Dillian Whyte is that while he might still be learning and picking up new tricks and stuff like that, it might be too late because the physical deterioration might be too great for the new tricks to compensate for. You get what I'm saying? So that's something you have to bear in mind. But yeah, Dillian Whyte, I think due to his lack of experience, he still hasn't quite rounded out his game and mastered all the things that he might be capable of mastering from a mindset. Let me not say mindset, but from a boxing technique perspective, there might be things that he can learn and implement, right? Maybe his ceiling from a technical point of view hasn't been reached yet, but it's a balancing act, right? Because you're going to need to have certain, your physical prime can't be too long in the past, even if you keep improving technically. Because, as I said already, at some point when your physical ability deteriorates to a certain extent, your technique is not going to compensate for it. So anyway, just repeating myself. AJ against Daniel Dubois. How do you think that fight would go? What do you think of that as a potential route for AJ? I'm sure many of you will be picking Daniel Dubois in that fight, and maybe Dubois would win. But most of you, I have to assume, would pick Tyson Fury over AJ right now. And we've already seen Usyk beat him twice. So why not go the Daniel Dubois route? I guess the one argument, and the main argument, maybe it's a strong argument against it, is that if you're going to take a risk, take that risk against Tyson Fury. Because at least then, it's for a belt, it's an enormous payday. Well, the Daniel Dubois fight would be for a belt, but, you know, a legitimate belt, not a secondary belt. So that will be a risk worth taking. But from a legacy perspective, beating Daniel Dubois is another name on the resume. Do you see what I'm saying? And maybe Daniel Dubois helps prepare him for a Tyson Fury. I know they're nothing alike stylistically, but from a mental perspective, going in there against a young puncher like that and coming out on top, it might, you know, increase that confidence and the resolve and make him feel like, okay, I actually am a crafty vet who can take these young lions down. And with that energy, I'm then going to go in there against the Gypsy King. You see what I'm saying? So anyway, let me know what you guys think. If you're tired of the biased narratives and mass censorship on mainstream platforms, and you want to be part of a community of critical thinkers who love free speech just as much as you do, then come and join me on Patreon and access my weekly no-holds-barred, censorship-free podcast where we lift the lid on a wide variety of controversial topics. It's not mainstream friendly, it's not politically correct, but that's the whole point. We dare to stand as a beacon of reason against an army of insanity. Just head on over to my Patreon page and select the tier called Hatman Hot Topics. You'll gain access to a minimum of 2 hours of exclusive content every single week, including podcasts, videos, interviews, live stream Q&As, as well as my popular Confessions of a Nightclub Bouncer series. Not to mention a vast back catalog of hundreds of hours of previous episodes. You can listen via the Patreon app with the option to download in high quality MP3. We've also got an Element group where you can come and chat and hang out with myself and other members. Unlike Discord, it has full end-to-end encryption, is decentralized, and is 100% censorship free. You can also send voice notes as well as much larger audio and video files than you can on Discord. So come and sign up on Patreon. There's no contract, there's no commitment, you can cancel at any time, and it's cheaper than a cup of coffee. So I'll see you over there. I'm out.